Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
The Salisbury City Council approves a contract for the parking garage in downtown Salisbury. Ocean View moves to ban the sale and production of cannabis. Efforts are now underway to create a domestic violence task force in Sussex County. We'll talk with Rabbi Yair Robinson of Wilmington about the brutal attack by Hamas. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. And in our studio this afternoon is Greg Bassett. He's editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent. And on the phone with us is Susan Canfora, reporter for Coastal Point. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Don.
Hi, Don.
So, Greg, I want to turn to you first and this decision by the Salisbury City Council to award the contract for this new parking lot. What do we know so far?
Yeah, controversial decision, and really it should not be as controversial as it has been. So what the council did is they agreed to go with a single source vendor on this very, very, very complicated project for Lot 1 in downtown Salisbury. So it's called the Salisbury Town Center. It's a multi-million-dollar, $30 to $60 million project. And as part of that project, there will be a city parking garage that will be sort of melded in underneath a lot of the construction that's going on there. The city has already approved $10 million for this construction. They're going to bond that, so it will be paid. There will be 400 spaces there. And because they're city spaces, the developer will not be able to hog all those spaces for themselves. It'll be available to the public. So their contribution is $750,000 toward the garage, and any cost overruns beyond the $10,750,000. People have used this sort of milestone in the road toward this project to say, wait a minute, why is there a single source vendor? Why wasn't this thing put out to bids? And the reason is it's because it's a very complicated construction project, and it's all going to be done by Gillis Gilkerson. So I'm trying to think of an analogy. I was trying to think of one, and it would kind of be like if you're building your house and you had a contractor that was going to do your house, and then you had to get another contractor who was going to build your garage. You know, you would want one contractor to do both things to be the most successful. And the city's procurement director made the decision to go with the single source vendor, and that was sort of seen controversial. But it's just another chance on this road to building this thing that people who are opposed could sort of stand up and squawk.
So, in fact, one of the people who came up and opposed it, of course, was Randy Taylor. He's a candidate for mayor here in Salisbury. He's cited the need for some kind of parking study. This is what he had to say.
I think this has the potential to be the worst thing that's happened to the downtown. As much as it's been sold as the greatest thing, it could be potentially the worst thing. It's a disaster from a development perspective. But give us some more time to think this project through. This is real. We've been down here for 25 years, and I see it as a big threat, very big threat.
So, Greg, in terms of parking, I know that there is a decision that's been made to take another look at the parking issue, to find out maybe some more amount of street parking, as it were. What about this idea that maybe they haven't thought this through yet?
Well, it's interesting. I had Randy Taylor on the PAC 14 show yesterday, and the interview actually bogged down with us arguing too long about this Salisbury Town Center project and this parking issue. So he's making contention. He's sharing a spreadsheet with everyone that the city's going to lose about $400,000 a year on this, and the point is the city loses lots of money on lots of different things. I'm not sure that the downtown parking garage that's been there for 40 years makes money. There's loss in lots of things, but certainly for a long time it didn't make money. But it was for the betterment of downtown. It's the government taking on a cost for the betterment of the growth. And it's the same thing with this. You know, the city, by all the projections, are going to make money on the back end through taxes for this, massive project while still protecting parking. So I'm not supposed to be arguing about these things, but I think his argument is not complete because you've got to consider the tax benefits to the city that are coming down the line. Same thing with the Horizons project, the same thing where there was a tax deferment up front with a payoff at the end. And I think that's really common in economic development in cities and towns across America now. It's not perhaps typical of our past, but it's the way the future works. And also, it's just a culture change. This is a city, and you're not going to have a Salisbury Mall or Center of Salisbury type experience when you visit downtown. You're going to have to park in a parking garage or at a metered spot to visit the businesses. Metered spots are a way of city applying taxes on people who enter the city from somewhere else. It's been part of our culture since cars were invented, and this is just another extension of that. So I'm not as alarmed by this as a lot of other people, but my job as a reporter is to explain their point of view on this.
By the way, do we have any sense about how accurate this $400,000 figure that he has put together? I mean, has anybody examined whether or not indeed this would be the cost?
Well, I was only a business major at the University of Maryland for a year and a half before I went back to journalism, but I can read a spreadsheet, and there's I could pick some of his numbers in terms of depreciation and things like that. So I don't know what's really going to happen with this. If it's really going to lose $400,000, it's going to cost the city some money up front. It is to provide parking, to build a new parking garage, because that's just the way it is.
Now, the vote, of course, was 4-1. April Jackson, of course, voted against it. The newly appointed Deshaun Doughty, he voted for it, and he said that he had taken a close look at this. This is how he addressed some of the concerns.
I did spend a lot of my day today. I do work, but all of my free time today on calls, reading materials, and just understanding the decision that I had to make today. I did not make any decision I made today lightly.
So what do we make of that? He's just been appointed. Has that generally been his position when he was running?
Yeah, that's part of Randy Taylor. He tried to structure it, not being critical of Randy at all, but he tried to structure it in terms of there wasn't transparency and the council didn't really know what it was voting on. But most of the stuff pretty much all of this stuff has been voted on in the past, going back to 2017, in terms of giving the property out, selling the property to the developers, and making the deal on the parking garage. This is just, like I said, another step in the road. But there was sort of that theme in the air of you guys are voting on this and you don't even know what you're talking about. And Deshaun, in his second council meeting, wanted to make clear that he had studied this issue and he was confident in how he was voting.
Susan, I might turn to you and the decision by the Ocean View Town Council. They're banning cannabis sales, cultivation, smoking lounges inside the city's limits.
Yes, well, for cannabis fans, the good news is that Ocean View residents will still be able to get medical marijuana in town, as they always have, as long as they have a medical marijuana card, of course. But even though state lawmakers passed House bills in April that legalized the possession of up to 1 ounce of recreational marijuana, even though they legalize that, you won't be able to buy it, and you won't be able to buy it legally until the beginning of 2025. But even though the state lawmakers legalize that, it won't be possible in Ocean View. You won't be able to buy it even at the beginning of 2025, because on Tuesday, the Ocean View Town Council passed an ordinance prohibiting marijuana from being sold, manufactured, cultivated, or tested in Ocean View. The Ocean View Council unanimously passed an ordinance banning all of those. Plus, they stopped retail stores and smoking lounges from opening in any zoning district in town. The House bills that passed give towns in Delaware the right to decide if they want to allow cannabis to be sold. Millsboro is working on a similar ordinance, and I think Millville and a couple other towns in lower Sussex County are also working on ordinances to stop the sale and distribution and manufacturing and testing of marijuana. At the Ocean View Council meeting Tuesday, 4 outspoken proponents of allowing it to be purchased spoke before the council. One of them, Brian Warnock, said it won't bring a bad element to town. Townsfolk won't see smoking on the street or people, with joints at grocery stores or getting high in parking lots. He said it will be just used recreationally. Most people are senior citizens like he is and would take it home and smoke it in the privacy of their homes. He said it has helped ease pain from chronic medical conditions, and unlike excessive use of alcohol, it doesn't cause public fighting. Regardless, Ocean View Mayor John Reddington told me before the meeting that residents and shop owners have told him they don't want it in their town. They don't want to smell it, and they are convinced it's a gateway drug. So we will not be seeing legal sales of marijuana in Ocean View, Don, anytime soon.
Now, I understand, however, that if you're in your own home and you've bought it, say, outside of city limits, you would be able to use it at that point, right?
Yes, and Mr. Warnock said that, all it's going to do if Ocean View refuses to allow it to be sold is users and buyers will just go to Maryland and buy it in Ocean City and then transport it back to their home. So, yes, it can be transported. As long as you're not smoking it in your car while you're driving, you can have it in your car, as long as it's less than an ounce an ounce or less, and you're driving it back to your home. So yes, that is legal.
Because it seems to me as if what we're hearing really is a cultural view of the use of marijuana. I mean, obviously, this has sort of come on top of some people who are not necessarily ready for legalization of recreational marijuana. But it does seem as if that's the case more perhaps than anything else.
It certainly seemed that way at the meeting Tuesday. There was certainly a difference of opinion, cultural. I would agree with you as part of that difference of opinion. At one point, one of the council members, Stephen Cobb, asked Mr. Warnock, why do you think Ocean View and these other towns want to ban this? And he said, you tell me. He said, I think one of the reasons is ignorance. They just don't understand. They think that it's, going to lead to heavy drug use, and it's going to cause, like I said, a bad element to come to town. But it's not, in his opinion, and many of the others who spoke that day, it's not going to do that. But the town of Ocean View, and all these towns have the right to ban it. The House Bill 1 and House Bill 2 that passed in April in Delaware allow the towns to stop it, but there's no such provision for the county. So the last I heard, Todd Lawson, who is the county administrator for Sussex County, is trying to get them to also allow a provision for the counties to stop it. But right now it is allowed outside of any town limits. But it will not be allowed in Ocean View.
By the way, and I don't know whether they've covered this or not, is there any indications of how law enforcement is going to have to deal with this? Whether they stop you or if they, obviously driving under the influence of marijuana, like any other drug, can be certainly can impair your driving.
Yes, and I did talk to the chief of police. Ken McLaughlin is the chief of police there, and we had a talk after the meeting, and I asked him about that, and he said there probably will have to be some special training for police officers because, unlike alcohol, marijuana stays in a person's system up to, I think you told me 14 days. It can stay up to into your system 2 weeks and continue to impair you as a driver for up to 2 weeks. So he said there will have to be some special training for officers to, be able to detect changes in behavior. But interestingly, with technology the way it is, there still is nothing on the market like a breathalyzer that can detect marijuana in somebody's system. I'm sure it's coming, but as of now, there's nothing on the market. So it's new, and Chief McLaughlin said it's everybody's learning as this as the days go by and the months go by, everybody's learning how to handle it and how to deal with it, and that includes the police officers.
Greg, return to you with the home of the Salisbury University lacrosse coach. Jim Berkman apparently was destroyed by fire. He's been coach, I guess, since 1989.
Yeah, unbelievable. Just one of those things, one of those you think, it can't happen to you, and it happened to him, so we all learned through that. But a fire at his home on Russell Avenue, Saturday morning, the house was pretty much destroyed. My first thought was we had done a feature on him some years ago, and he's got an amazing memorabilia collection in his basement. I'm told that most of that was preserved. They were able to save that. But they weren't home at the time. Passerby spotted the fire. It was a typical Saturday morning. Several firefighters there. There were 2 firefighters who were injured during the fighting of the fire. And just an awful thing for the Berkmans. Just a real tragedy. So the community's really rallied around them, as has the university. They did lose 3 pets in the fire, 2 cats and their dog. Just an awful thing in that Pinehurst neighborhood.
Because one of the things, as a matter of fact, I saw some of the photos, and it's overwhelming in terms of the kind of, we saw the fire just like leaping out of, pouring out of windows.
Yeah, it's amazing, with the social networking and everyone having a cell phone now, when the firefighters roll up on something, they take a picture right away. And this was, flames coming out of all the windows, and it was really, really stunning to see. But they were there within 7 minutes. They were there as quick as they could, and they did an amazing job to protect what they could. But again, just a tragedy. And it also shows how connected. It surprised me how connected the community is with the lacrosse team. So as a dunderhead, when I wrote the fire story, I put at the end that he had been champion of 12 NCAA championship teams. And I immediately received at least 20 texts and emails from people saying the correct number was 13. So people read all the way to the end of the story, and they knew off the top of their head how successful Jim Berkman and his program had been. So the connections are really there.
Any sense, by the way, as to either the cause and whether or not they're going to be able to rebuild?
Only heard so far that it started in the living room, but I haven't heard any other details.
Yeah, and I assume that it'll take a while for this thing to be...
Yeah, it's a charming house and a classic
it
Salisbury
like
neighborhood.
Yeah,
a little kind of a elongated Cape Cod A nice little house with a basement and just a perfect little home, and it's just a shame.
Susan, I want to turn to you. Longtime Bethany Beach Police Chief Michael Redmond. He was suspended from duty after a DUI ticketing, if nothing else, I guess, it looks like. What do we know so far in terms of where the city is with this, and also do we know anything about his case?
Well, you might remember, Don, that in late May, Michael Redmond, who's the former chief of police in Bethany Beach, was stopped and he was suspended after he was charged with driving under the influence. He was stopped in Selbyville a little after midnight on May 30th. The Bethany Beach Town Council, the town manager, Clifton Gravier, and the mayor have said very little, if anything, about this since it happened. It's been almost impossible to get any information from them. But recently I caught up with Mayor Rosemary Hardiman, and she told me at the time the case is resolved in the court system, the council will review the incident and then make a decision about his future. She said the council members will determine what the future actions will be, what the town's actions will be regarding former Chief Redmond, who at the time he was stopped was 56 years old. I asked her if she'd like to see this settled by a certain time and get it out of the way, because it's kind of a red mark against the town. The town, some of the town council members are very happy to say that they're never in the news and there's never any bad news that comes out of Bethany. So, of course, they want to get this settled as soon as they can. She said the council has no control over timing and has to wait for the courts. Neither she nor the town manager would say anything further. But after Redmond was charged, I talked to Delaware State Police Corporal Leonard DeMalto, and he told me that Redmond was not driving a marked police vehicle, but there seems to be some question in the community, and he wouldn't really answer this, but there seemed to be some question in the community if he was driving an unmarked police vehicle, in the vehicle that was in the police department's fleet, but not a marked vehicle. Corporal DeMalto said it was against regulations, against state police policy, to tell me if Redmond got a breathalyzer test, and if he did, what the results were. He would say, though, that Redmond got a traffic ticket. He was not taken to jail. He was not put in a holding cell. He was released to what the trooper called a sober individual. That's all he would say. And we also know that Redmond has been chief about 20 years, and interestingly, he designed the logo that they use on the side of the police vehicles. But he won't be using those police vehicles any longer, at least until the town council decides what to do. So that's all we know so far, and as we get more updates, we'll certainly keep you informed.
Well, one question I had was, it said that he was issued a ticket. Do we know what that was for? I mean, do we know? I mean, usually, particularly if you've got a DUI, they take you to jail, as it were. I mean, do we know any sense about what that piece of it is?
The only thing I could find out, and it was only from the state trooper, was that he was stopped for erratic driving. He had come out of a bar. My understanding is he had come out of a bar in Ocean View and was driving through Selbyville when he was stopped and got a ticket for a DUI. He was not taken to jail, no. And he was not even put in his cell or a holding cell or anything. He was just turned over to probably a family member who was sober. That's about all we can find out.
So the ticket was for a DUI?
Yes, it was a DUI, driving under the influence, yes.
Okay. Greg, I want to turn to you. We had a swearing in of a new Salisbury police chief. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, David Meinstein is our new chief, following a tough act with Barbara Duncan, who we always called her sort of the Energizer Bunny of the police department. And sort of the talk on the street was that Meinstein was more old school. He's a career police officer with Salisbury. He's a Salisbury guy, went to Parkside High School. And then he might just be sort of a status quo guy, but that's not going to be the case at all. And he's going to try to redefine the community policing aspects of Salisbury. There's all kinds of ways to do that. The different chiefs have had different deployment methods in terms of managing problems within the neighborhoods. And it really looks like that Meinstein is going to be a very proactive guy. One of his first steps was to announce a big series of promotions. We'll be running that in the paper this week, where there's a lot of job changes, where personalities are going to match what the officers actually do in terms of what they're good at. So really looking forward to working with Chief Meinstein.
Do we have any sense, by the way, how he will contrast himself with Duncan?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's a real good guy. He's real affable, but he's also very serious. He can put the police face on very fast. Very respected by the people in the Corps below him. He's got a very military aspect in terms of how he runs things. He's a longtime Air Force member of the U.S. Air Force and also in the Air Force Reserves. So he's got a military sense about him as well as the policing sense.
The other thing, Greg, that we have is apparently, Wicomico County Executive Julie Giordano is going to hold a session with legislative delegation stakeholders. What do we expect to come out of that?
Right. The legislative breakfast is usually on a weekend, but this week it's going to be on Monday morning at the Wicomico Civic Center. And this is an important one because you have seen in years past where the county has been late getting to lawmakers about what they want to accomplish in Annapolis in the upcoming session, which of course begins in January. So this will be the council and the administration with Giordano talking about things that they need to get passed in Annapolis. And one of the big things is still the issue with the alcohol dispensaries in Wicomico. They tried to put a bill in too late last year. They weren't organized enough, so they're going to really get their ducks in a row, hopefully this year, to get that done. The sewer stuff is also very important for the county. We're trying to have a regional sewer plan with a sanitary commission. We're going to need state money for that. So there really needs to be some coordination between the council, the executive, and the legislature in terms of what the message is going to be going to Annapolis. And of course, as we keep talking about, we just had Bill Chambers from the Chamber of Commerce on the PAC 14 show recently, and he was talking to one of the committee presidents in Annapolis, and the question was, what the heck is going on down there in Wicomico between your executive and your council? So these people in the state who dispense state dollars are hesitant to give money to, governments that don't have their act together. So this meeting on Monday is going to be especially important.
I mean, you expect the state lawmakers in particular to be looking very closely then at that relationship between Giordano on the one hand and how the council members tend to react. I mean, I don't know how much you can read in a meeting like that, but
I do, and I expect them to call it out on this. Now, there was a big break just a couple weeks ago. Now, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but it's collective bargaining time in terms of negotiating salaries with the sheriff's office in Wicomico, and the lawyers that are on the bench for the county are not really qualified. They're qualified, but they're not skilled in contract negotiation. So the tradition has always been to hire an outside attorney. Julie Giordano tried to hire Dan Cox, the kind of far right-wing Republican who ran for governor, not at all by resume qualified for such an undertaking. But then 2 weeks ago, they did agree to a contract with a law firm that's sort of fronted by Boyd Rutherford, our former lieutenant governor in Maryland, who's a Republican, a very respected law firm. And it passed unanimously by the council to approve this law firm to do the collective bargaining. So I think it showed that Julie wanted to do the right thing by putting a law firm forward that the council would approve rather than trying to make it her way. Or it could have been her way, and everyone sort of agreed that this was a legitimate law firm. But I sort of read that as a positive sign of some sort of cooperation.
Finally, Susan, there are efforts to create a domestic violence task force in Sussex County, and one of the leaders of that is a local activist, businesswoman, Patty Rickman, who organized a rally. I guess it was in Georgetown this past April. What do we know about this effort and the activist herself?
Yes, a Long Neck resident who has, for the past year, been a really tireless advocate for women in abusive relationships and who's working for the formation of a domestic violence task force in Sussex County, is going to be the guest on an internationally known podcast this weekend. Patty Rickman, who survived a 4-year ordeal with an abusive partner in a same-sex relationship and whose former partner not only threatened her but tried to kill her, will be telling her story on the Alabama-based podcast, which is hosted by Misty Shaviers. They're going to record that this Sunday, and then the episode called I'm a Survivor will be available after 1:30 p.m. on this Sunday. So if you're interested in listening to it, look for episode number 141 called A Chat with Patty. Patty Rickman, who is a psychic and owns a business called Serendipitous, Your Spiritual Oasis Awaits You, in Long Neck, told me she wanted to share her story to shine a light to help ensure the justice is served for offenders using the system, specifically those using family court, and working to see that the abuse of victims is not permitted. Seeing that a task force is created, like there are in Kent and Newcastle counties, but not in Sussex County, she said would force protection from abuse orders to be authenticated. That's because those orders, commonly known as PFAs, are used by domestic violence offenders to further abuse, stalk, or threaten their victims. She said her offender did exactly that, and that Sussex County Family Court has evidence of that. She's also working with a local domestic violence shelter to help with fundraisers, including one called What Is Your Voice? that is raising money right now to build a shelter with many rooms in it so that victims who have to get away quickly, sometimes while trying to keep their children safe, have a place to go. She told me that that podcast host, Misty Shavirs, is a nationally recognized victims advocate who has won awards for impacting her community. Shavirs sent me an email to describe herself, and she said her podcast is a mix of down-home advice with education on domestic violence. So we'll be looking for that interesting and informative podcast on Sunday, Don.
Well, as a matter of fact, and we'll also have a full interview with Patty Rickman in our next upcoming segment. So we'll stay tuned for that as well. We've been speaking with Greg Bassett. He's editor general manager of the Salisbury Independent. On the phone with us is Susan Canfor, reporter for Coastal Point. Appreciate both of you stopping by and chatting with us.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Don.
You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.